Hi, hello, bonjour, and namaste. This is Out of the Clouds, a podcast at the crossroads between business and mindfulness. And I'm your host, Anne V. Müller-Thaler. Today, my guest is Jeremy Langmead. Jeremy is an incredibly talented man who was one of the founders of the global men's e-tailer, Mr. Porter. For them, he oversaw design, branding, content, social, as well as events. And it's around that time that Jeremy and I crossed paths as we had some good friends in common. I remember a lively dinner in New York City in particular. Jeremy has also served as the Chief Content Officer at Christie's, where he helped digitalize the auction house and all their consumer touchpoints. He also launched LUXX magazine for the Times in 2017, and prior to that, he served as editor-in-chief of titles such as Esquire magazine, Wallpaper, and my beloved Sunday Times Style magazine. Today, Jeremy writes for the Times. He also has a grooming column, which I love to read, for the Times LUXX, and he wrote a book, which we talk about, called Vainglorious on Male Vanity. Jeremy also publishes a weekly podcast called How Long Have You Got, which he co-hosts with his friend Sarah. Aside from that, Jeremy consults for a number of fashion and grooming brands. So today we talk about it all. He tells me about his early beginnings in fashion, his time at Central St. Martin's, and how he landed his first job. I asked him lots of questions about Mr. Porter because it's a business that's been close to my heart for a long time. We talk about content, career, media, trying to understand and speak the right language for men to shop online, and of course, grooming. And then we pivot to talk about what Jeremy and I laughingly call the cancer chapter, starting with how he wrote an article for the Times 2 years ago, revealing his prostate cancer diagnosis, his treatment, and surgery. He also tells me about how he has been on a mission ever since to raise awareness for prostate cancer testing. He decided to join forces with a new friend, Sarah, also a cancer patient. Together they host How Long Have You Got, where in their own words, they try to take the kerfuffle out of cancer. So there's a lot in there. We talk about semantics of cancer, what words to say and not to say, death literacy. I asked Jeremy how he relates to his body. We also talk and laugh a lot when he shares about how enthusiastic he found himself to be writing his own eulogy. And he offers this beautiful advice to just do it, aka try everything. I'm thrilled to be bringing you my conversation. It's thoughtful, honest, and funny despite the subject matter. So without further ado, I give you my interview with Jeremy Langmead. Happy listening. Jeremy, it's so nice to see you. Welcome to Out of the Clouds.
Thank you. Nice to see you. It's been too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very
so
long.
Tell me first, where am I finding you today?
So I'm in Primrose Hill in London. I mostly live in the Lake District in Cumbria in the north of England. I pop up to London for work, treatment, see friends. And I'm really lucky. My sister has a house in Primrose Hill. And I have a designated bedroom that's mine. So this is where I am when I'm in London. I used to live in Primrose Hill, so it really does feel like coming home. So that's where I am today.
That's gorgeous. And I have to say, I'm really loving the green behind you.
She loves the colours. So, yeah, there's colour everywhere. It's not a necessarily flattering one against my skin tones, but I can live with it.
On camera, it looks good.
Good.
You seem to have a bit of a tan, so yeah, that works.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, it helps if your background is arsenic green.
So, as you already know, what I like to do when at the top of the podcast is to invite my guests to tell their stories and to tell it quite freely. I'd love to find out what or who Jeremy was as a kid.
Oh,
what did you want to be as you grew up, and what brought you to be the person you are today?
Okay, God, that's a big question, Anne. I'm not sure one that I should share. I suppose my childhood was about running away and creating perfect worlds, which I didn't feel were the worlds I was in when I was young. My mother, quite an amazing woman, but she is very keen on getting married, and she's been married 5 times. There were a lot of new dads every sort of 10 minutes when I was a child. And my actual dad, they had a terrible bitter custody battles with sort of social workers, lawyers, the local MP, quite a big traumatic. So that happened. And then she married a guy who turned out to be an alcoholic and died at the age of 39. So that was quite traumatic. And then she married someone who was very nice, but had undiagnosed bipolar condition. So one day he was just carted off to a mental institution and we didn't see him again. And then there's a few more after that. So it was quite an unsettled childhood, one could say. And so I think I asked to go to boarding school. I must be one of the few people who begged to go to boarding school. So I went off to boarding school, which was a respite from the rather tumultuous home life. And I think that really messy childhood gave me a desire to create perfect worlds and wonderful worlds and fantasy worlds. And I think that's probably fed into where I ended up. For many years, and this is true, I was at a Roman Catholic boarding school. I wasn't Roman Catholic myself, but I really went for the Catholicism. And I decided a little bit of me hasn't given up on this ambition, despite there being a few rocky roads on that path, is I wanted to be Pope. And I would still quite like to be a Pope. There's a few obstacles. I'm married to a man. I'm not actually a Roman Catholic. I may not have led a sinless life. However, I think obstacles can always be overcome and papacy could be around the corner. So that was my I used to go around blessing people all the time, practicing for when I was Pope Jeremiah the first or second.
That's lovely. Gosh, I love that. That's a very unusual ambition, but I do appreciate it.
It was unusual.
Was it the gold bathtub that was drawing you, or?
I think the clothes were quite an important part of it, and plus the Roman splendor. But I think eventually I gave up on papacy and ended up in fashion, which isn't always a million miles away from that. And I think another of my escape routes after boarding school was I bought all those fashion magazines like The Face and Blitz, and just saw these pictures of these really cool club kids who seemed to be having an amazing time. And they always were students at St. Martin's School of Art. So I thought, that's where I have to go. And so I applied to get into St. Martin's, and luckily I did get in. And I studied fashion, but I hated making clothes and sewing. And so I specialized in the fashion journalism and communication part of the course. And then one thing led to another. So it was all running away from things led me to things. So I'm glad that I ran away from things when I was young.
Yeah, that's amazing. How was St. Martin's when you were there?
It was so fun.
Yeah, because it sounds like it was just the most amazing place to be.
It really was. It was in the middle of I went there in 1985, so I was there bang in the middle of club world and crazy clothes, and John Galliano had just graduated, and Saint Julian was there and I wasn't. It was all about going to nightclubs and dressing up, and we went to the same 2 nightclubs every Tuesday and every Thursday, and they would just, Lee Barry would be dancing away, and everyone was dancing, and you had to wear a different outfit every single time you went to these clubs. So it was all about creating outfits, and it was really fun. I wouldn't say I learned a huge amount on my course, but I learned how to have fun. I learned about dressing up. I learned about socializing. And I think the useful thing was it was a 4-year course, and in the 3rd year, you did a year out of placement year. And I did placement at Cosmopolitan, the Daily Telegraph, and ended up working for Vogue Men. It used to be a Vogue Men section in British Vogue all those years ago. And the fashion director then was called Marcus von Ackermann. And so I ended up being his assistant for 2 or 3 years, actually. While I was at St. Martin's, I continued being his assistant after the placement year. And so it ended up in that bonkers but rather fabulous fashion world. And then moved into journalism from that. I didn't want to just do clothes, and so I ended up doing lifestyle and features.
So first of all, that sounds like a really wonderful study plan. As someone who dropped out of university, I feel vaguely envious because there was nothing remarkably as fun as what you did in Geneva, Switzerland. We're not known for our clubbing, to be fair. So did you feel an attraction to the written word before you got started?
I did. Yes. I lived in Norway as well with one of the husbands for a few years. And when we lived in Norway, I didn't speak Norwegian and couldn't watch TV because it was in Norwegian, couldn't go to the cinema, it was in Norwegian. So all I did was read. So I was a prolific reader. I'd read every Dickens novel by the age of 9. So that made me love storytelling and writing. And then obviously I learned a bit more at St. Martin's, a little bit more. But I was lucky on the last week of the course, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do once I graduated. And Jessie Wood was the secretary in the fashion department at St. Martin's. And she wasn't in her office and her phone rang, and she was quite old. So I thought, I'll answer the phone. She'll never make it in time. So I picked up the phone, and it was a lady from the Sunday Times, said that they were looking for a junior sub-editor. Would St. Martin's be able to recommend anyone from the fashion journalism course that might be appropriate to interview for the job? And so I said, yes, there's someone called Jeremy Langmead, who I recommend highly. I will happily send him along. And I immediately didn't tell anyone else about this. So I was the only candidate, and I got the job. And I didn't even know what a sub-editor was. And so being a sub-editor, where basically you're correcting and editing to tell a story succinctly. So it was just luck that I landed up there and landed in this job.
That's fantastic. So you've worked for some of the most amazing publications across your career. How did you go on to the various places that you then spend time in?
Yeah, I launched the Sunday Times Style magazine, which was really fun.
You launched it? I hadn't
Yeah,
realized.
because it was a newspaper supplement, and then we made it into a magazine. So there was a style section. But, oh gosh, that must have been 95,
because I still read it. It's one of my favorite magazines.
Oh, good. No, it's
have
fun.
the app on the iPad.
Oh, do you?
Specifically because I love to read the Sunday Times Style, and I do love to read Kate and Moran as well in the Saturday Times.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. But yeah, it's very much a fashion magazine now. It was a features section of the newspaper when I was there. So it was very much on the week's stories. So it was quite exciting because you were the features part of the newspaper, because you just went to press 3 days before the Sunday came out. So it was quite last minute. And we always used to work till 4 a.m, mostly leading up to press night. But it was so fun being on a big newspaper in the heyday of newspapers, and you could be mischievous, naughty, and so many people read it. And it was a really exciting, sexy job. I loved it. One of my favourite jobs, I think. And then because the style section was quite influential, I got offered jobs on magazines, and I thought it'd be fun to do magazines. So I did Nova for a short while, and then Evening Standard, again, very exciting, because that was back in the day when there were 4 editions a day of the Standard. And
wow.
I had to get into the office at 7. I had to present the features list by 8, and then you had to get the features out of that afternoon's paper. So it was really last minute. But again, it was really exciting because everyone you knew lived in London, so London was the only place that mattered back then. So it was really good fun. And then I got asked to go to Wallpaper magazine, which was a completely bonkers world. And then Esquire, which was lovely to do a men's magazine. And then I got asked to go to Mr. Porter. And there's 2 times in my life. One time, I remember seeing an ad for a style editor of the Sunday Times when I was quite young. And I thought, that's the job I want. And I applied for it. I didn't get it for years because I was just still at college. But I knew that was the job. And then I got it. It was so amazing years later. I had that role. And when they announced that they were launching Mr. Porter, and I thought, God, I really hope Natalie Massenet calls me, because I really want to get into the e-commerce world and the digital world. I've done enough print. And then amazingly that call came, and I ended up helping launch Mr. Porter, and was there for 8 years. And that was really exciting. There was so much change happening in menswear, and e-commerce and digital content was such an exciting place to be at the time. And they were really good. I've been so lucky to have jobs where I've learned things. So to be paid to learn things is just the biggest treat and joy in the world, I think.
Yeah. And you worked with such an amazing, I don't know the teams that you worked with at Wallpaper or at Esquire so much, but at Mr., you guys had the most fantastic group of people putting it together. And it was funny because I was in the wings as a supporter. And we tried with Toby and your buying team several times.
Yeah.
And Louboutin was just they were against working with Mr. Porter. It was the bane of my life. But it was really exciting because there was a very different tone and personality to this website as from any other e-commerce that I've come across. Do you mind talking a bit about how you guys worked together? Because it really felt like Mr. was like a someone. And you also brought out a paper, which at the time was quite something.
Mr. Porter Post. It was Eric Tortenson and the crew at Saturday where they were at the time. And it was their idea to launch a brand called Mr. Porter under the Net-a-Porter umbrella. And they presented that idea to Natalie Massenet. And so they have to take the credit for coming up with the idea of Mr. Porter. But then I got there, and this was the title, and this was going to be roughly the look of it. And I had to fill in the gaps and create the words and how we would talk and what we would write about and what the visuals would be like and all the customer touch points, how Mr. Porter would sound. And it was really fun because you just create a world. that doesn't exist. And that's what we got to do. And we worked very closely, the buying team and the creative and editorial teams worked very closely together. I went on the buying trips. The buying team were very involved also in the content. And it really was a cohesive approach to making men feel comfortable buying clothes and buying fashion and enjoying it. No one really was doing that properly in the digital space. And that was the idea. I remember Natalie at the beginning said, what are everyone's ambitions? I said, I wanted Mr. Porter to be synonymous with men's style. And that was the ambition. And I also wanted Mr. Porter to appear in a rap song. And it did. A$AP Rocky mentioned us in one of his lyrics. And I thought, okay, job done. I'm done. This is fine. But it was just thinking about how men tick and how they think and how they shop. And actually, it's probably changed. It will have changed over the last decade. But back then, men shopped very differently to women. So Net-a-Porter was very successful then and knew what they were doing. But we had to rethink that all for men. It was a different way that men shopped and thought. And Net-a-Porter would say to its customers, this is the Celine bag of the season, buy it. But you couldn't say that to a guy. If you said, this is the bag of the season, it'd tell you to bog off. So you had to think of different ways of giving context really to clothes in men's lives and why they might want to buy it. And men ask a lot of questions. And if you can answer those questions, they'll buy. And so we had to make sure that every question was answered. And you have to gain their trust and their confidence. And that's why we really went for the style rather than for just fashion. We didn't want to frighten anyone away.
It's interesting because it's also style as a term invites a sense of timelessness, right? Which means that you're no longer victim to the trends, for example, which again it helps establish trust because you feel it's that retail vocabulary of investing in something.
And I think that's true. And you've got to make men trust you and understand you. And at the beginning, it's changed now. But at the beginning, we never showed the models' heads because we didn't want the men to think, oh, that's too young for me, or that's too old for me, or that's not right for me. Because I think men can be quite literal, or they were then. We're far more sophisticated shoppers now, a decade later. So you had to just not frighten people off or make it think it wasn't for them. And so we really had to think about that and how to engage them. And it was a really fun challenge.
And what were you trying to do with the Mr. Porter post?
I suppose we were creating all this content and it seemed a shame that it was only digital and not everyone might have seen it. And also it was a bit, who are we to dictate where men should read what content we created? And we should give them a choice. They could find us on social media. They could find us obviously online because we were an e-commerce site. But also if they wanted to, they could find us in print. And I didn't think we should be dictatorial about where people read about clothes or read about us. And we should be in whatever format they wish us to be at whatever time of day. And that's why we put ourselves everywhere in everything.
That's great. I remember I read it. It had such great writing. And as a woman, I was enjoying reading about men's style.
Good. But that was also the point that the female customer was a big menswear customer, particularly from October towards Christmas. 30% of our sales were to women buying for men. So it was really important to try and make it easier for women to understand how men dressed or what size they might be or what would an architect wear, what would a builder wear, what would a fashionista wear. We wanted to answer all those questions for all the shoppers. So it really was just trying to make sure there were no questions unanswered in everything that we did. So it was a seamless service.
Yeah. That's fascinating because then, yes, you're making it a much more compelling retail experience if people can find their answers.
Yeah, exactly. Finding the answers and also enjoying it. And that was another reason maybe for doing a print edition is it was also a nice marketing tool. But also sometimes you just want to lean back in a chair and read something like that. And sometimes you want to scroll. Mostly you want to scroll, but sometimes it's more relaxing. And the journey from, reading to basket is a less streamlined one, obviously from print to shopping basket online, but it still works.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And I think it probably also just, as you mentioned before, creates a sense of connection to the brand. So the trust, the loyalty, the understanding, it stays in the consumer perception. And I remember on occasion hearing guys around me, including really funny, my solicitor, who decided to share, I don't know over what context, over a cup of coffee, how much he enjoyed putting things in his basket.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. I love solicitors. They're quite good shoppers, actually.
Yeah.
But and also the brands like to see that there was print as well as digital content. And at the beginning, not everyone was convinced that they needed to sell online. And before we launched, I remember going with Natalie, we'd go to Milan, we'd go and see Dolce, and we'd go and see Prada, and we'd say, look, this is Mr. Porter, you need to be on it, it's going to be really important. And they would go, we're not so sure it's important, the online shopping. And then we think, what, you're crazy. And then, of course, they did come on board. And now they're all very good at doing it themselves. But they did the fact that they got print as well as digital content. It was good for brands as well as for us.
Yeah, and you guys also did some really funny and cool activations. I remember our good friend Emma, who was particularly excited. It was right when that TV show Suits.
Suits, yes. Wow, that was such a huge, insane project. My God, it almost killed me.
I'm sure it did. I can't remember the ins and outs of it, but I just knew there were a lot of guys in suits on bicycles in Manhattan.
Yeah. We had a fleet of guys cycling through Manhattan. We opened a shop downtown in Soho. We did a big fashion show on the High Line with Meghan Markle and all the guys from Suits there. I mean, it's insane that we managed to pull these things off.
It's hilarious. It's brilliant.
It was fun. Really fun.
And so what prompted you to go away from Mr. Porter, and what happened next, if I may ask?
I'd been there I was at Mr. Porter a few years, and I left for a year to go to Christie's to be Chief Content Officer at Christie's. And I shouldn't have gone, really, but the CEO was very persuasive and won't deny they offered me a lot of money. And also I thought, good, I don't know about the art world, so it'd be really interesting. And they wanted me to be Chief Content Officer. So I went to be Chief Content Officer at Christie's. But at the time, most of the people at Christie's were quite against digital content.
Sure.
And so I had quite a few battles to fight there, but it was quite exciting, but insane. And they were a bit behind the times. They're better now. And Natalie asked me to go back to Mr. Porter. And I thought, you know what, a year at Christie, that's enough. I need to go back to the modern world. And in fact, it was the decision to go back to Mr. Porter from Christie's was the CEO who hired me at Christie's was fired. And then the next day we got an email, or the senior team got an email saying, Stephen's left, we now need to slow the pace of change. And I thought, oh my God, can you imagine Steve Jobs writing that to the team at Apple? I cannot work for a company that wants to slow the pace of change, the worst words ever. Yeah. So I went back for a few more years at Mr. Porter. But then it was enough. I don't think you should stay too long in jobs because you're not fresh. You need new ideas. You need younger people who can see different things to the way you've done it. And so I always feel that you've got to let the new generation take over, and it was time for me to let them do that. And I wanted to leave having enjoyed it and not fade away. I wanted to just go and pop off.
That's very smart. I admire you.
Who knows? It was a good decision, but I think it was.
And so what are you doing at the moment, if I may ask?
Yeah,
you consult, but can you tell me more?
Yes. So, I left Mr. Porter and it was lockdown. Literally my last day at Mr. Porter was during lockdown, the first week of lockdown. And so I had a reset and I moved to the Lake District to Cumbria. And I really wanted some time off. I've been working in offices and working really hard for 28 odd years. So it was really nice to have a break. And I wrote a book because I got a bit bored during lockdown. So I thought, I'll do a book. So I did the book. And then I started doing consultancy. And so now I write for various newspapers and I do consultancy and I do a podcast. And then I got ill. And then it's quite hard to work out work when you're ill. It's a dilemma which I still struggle with.
Thanks for mentioning that. We can get into that a little bit more. I had not worked out the math that you'd left Mr. right at the beginning of the first lockdown. What timing?
Yeah, I know. I think I was quite lucky because I didn't have all that hassle that everyone had of trying to work out how to navigate teams during lockdown. So I was just in the Lake District sitting outside the garden thinking, phew.
Thank God, at least that. I'd love to talk a bit about the book that you brought out, actually. Can you tell me the story behind Vainglorious?
Yeah, I'm quite vain. And also I've worked in an industry that's all about clothes and grooming, and I write a grooming column for the Times too. And I've always felt it's a bit unfair that the word vain gets a bad press.
I agree with you, which is why I wanted to lead on that.
I know, and it's made me cross, and it's unfair. Why shouldn't men want to look good or feel good? And it's totally a choice. I don't think you should have to look good, but if you want to, don't be embarrassed about it. And the stupid thing, which I learned from working at Mr. Porter and other places, was men don't ask each other about these things. So they suffer quietly, or I think the great thing about the internet was men would be able to anonymously Google things and no one would know it was them asking. So that's been a great change for the way men dress and for the way they may want to look. But I would have friends who worked in finance or big corporate jobs, and I'd go to a dinner party and someone would mention that their hair was thinning, and they'd all chuckle slightly and say, "Oh, I don't know what you're going to do about that." And I think I could tell you what to do about that, but they didn't ask each other, but they did feel comfortable asking me because I was gay and had worked in fashion. Oh, we can ask the gay guy, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I got asked lots of questions by men about grooming and can I do this and can I do that? And I was writing about different grooming treatments for the Times. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to put this in a book. And then if guys want to know about this stuff, it's here. And it was a rally for it's okay to care about how you look. And so I just wrote this book based around what I'd done and my feelings on vanity and some thoughts about vanity from childhood to adulthood, and then plus some of the treatments that you can do. And for instance, the Times asked you to go and interview this guy, one of the top hair transplant guys on Harley Street. And I went to interview him. And I said to him, I don't really know much about this because I'm very lucky. I don't need a hair transplant, but I treat to them all. And I could see him look at my hair.
I know. I love that part of the book. And he
rude
came
of
at
him,
you
I know. He did. He got out and he said, your hair has receded. And I knew it receded a bit, but I hadn't really noticed because it was so slow. But it had gone a fair bit back on my forehead. And he took a marker pen and drew where my hairline used to be. And as soon as someone shows you what you did have and could have again, you want it. And I thought, okay, well, this will make a good copy. So great, I'll do a hair transplant. So I did the hair transplant and it was a great day out. You're on amazing painkillers. You're as high as a kite. You just sit there eating Haribo, watching telly while they spend 7 hours moving all these follicles in the back of your head to the front of your head. And then you got hair again. And how great is that if you want hair? Lots of people look great without hair, but some people worry about not having hair. And there's quite a few men who I've sent to this guy to have their hair done, really quite macho city guys, and they said it's changed their lives. They feel so much happier, more confident to have their hair back. And so I thought, oh God, I'm putting this in a book, and I don't care if I'm out there as Mr. Vanity Pants. It's
not again.
It'll maybe be a little bit helpful to a few people.
I really enjoyed that story, as I did the one time you got your eyelashes tinted.
That wasn't. I looked like Joan Collins. That was an appalling thing to try. Yeah,
I know.
Terrible.
And it's such
I look like a drag queen.
thing.
I love drag queens, but I don't want to look like one.
Yeah, one doesn't know what one looks like until you try what they call blue-black.
And that's what it was. And everyone was too polite to mention it in the office.
Hi, it's Anne again. Are you feeling lost or burnt out? If so, I empathize. I have been there myself. Actually, I flirted with burnout for years, and no, I'm not proud of that. I was lucky, however, to find both meditation and coaching around the same time. And this was a pivotal moment in my life. With the dual help of mindfulness and compassion tools as well as coaching, I was finally able to move out of what felt like quicksand. You know that scary feeling when you're pedaling so hard, expending energy trying to move forward, and yet you find that the more you push, the more stuck you feel? Now, surprisingly, a few years later, I followed my instinct and decided to train as a coach. Of course, I had been on the receiving end of excellent coaching, so I knew the power of the methods. As a certified coach with Martha Beck's Wayfinder Life Coach training and a certified mindfulness teacher and mentor, I am dedicated to supporting you who are in need of a helping hand, just like I used to be. I also bring a blend of business savvy, storytelling, spirituality, mindful communication tools that will help you transition from career exhaustion to trusting yourself again. If you feel ready to explore a new perspective, if you're aching to take the next right action, book your free 30-minute one-on-one coaching session with me. Just click the link in the show notes. And now back to my conversation.
We started talking about working and what's it like to work with being sick.
Yes.
So perhaps we can now move our attention to that.
Yeah, the cancer chapter.
I was doing my best not to call it a journey.
I know, it's so hard.
It's really hard, but I laughed so much when you were saying to Stephen Fry, anything that's got the the word luggage in it seems more cheerful. Experience, chapter,
grand voyage.
I like the idea of a grand tour, but...
yes, I like the idea of a grand tour. Slightly oversells it, but it gives hope.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway,
so I read the article that you wrote in the Times in 2023 about your experience with cancer. And you mentioned it just a few moments ago that you got sick. And before getting into it, I was wondering, you've obviously been in and around the media. You were editor-in-chief at a number of publications. You're used to having, let's say, a media persona, but that's still a very, tender topic, I can imagine.
Yeah.
How did you feel about putting yourself out there in that way?
I did think long and hard about writing that piece, not because it was personal, but because so many people have such bad versions of cancer and have had worse stories than mine so far, touch wood. So I didn't want to be a pity me story. But I did really want to raise awareness of prostate cancer testing because, if you do your PSA test as early as possible and you catch prostate cancer very early, you can be fine. You can be cured. If it's too late, then it can spread around your body and metastases. And then you're in a dangerous position. So I thought it was really important. And so I wrote that piece. And as you say, I had a bit of a media profile. And in fact, many years ago, when my wife and I amicably separated, but she was writing a column about our relationship already in The Observer.
Oh, she was.
So that column ended up being about our marriage ending. And there were some Sundays when I'd get The Observer and above the masthead, it would say, India night on my husband, blah, 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 blah. So I was used to that a little bit. I'd had a baptism of fire many years before. But I just thought it was an important thing to write. And again, going back to the Men Don't Talk to Each Other, and this is another thing that men don't talk about, is their health and having medicals and checkups enough. And that's why I did it. And do you know what was, I just actually saw my GP yesterday, and when that piece came out, he diagnosed 6 men with prostate cancer who come in having read that piece. Wow. 4 of them, it was caught early, 2 of them, it was more advanced. So I'm so glad I did it, because even if it was just those 4 people whose lives are potentially saved by reading that piece, what a useful thing for once that I've done. Having spent a life, when people ask what I write about or what I cover, I always say all the unimportant things in life. Slightly jokingly, but slightly true. And so it was quite nice to do something that was more serious and hopefully helpful. And what was also nice was I literally got hundreds and hundreds of messages from men, comments under the piece online, messages on LinkedIn, messages on Instagram from complete strangers. And it was men and some women sharing their stories of prostate cancer, some of whom were soon to die, some of whom had better luck. And I just felt, and I know it sounds a bit corny, but I just felt so privileged that these people shared their stories with me and I was able to connect with them. So it was, I felt very honored to be able to write that piece. And it was a very open and honest piece, but I felt it was quite important.
Yeah, I learned a lot. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I need to send it to a few people.
It's useful. I didn't know really about the prostate or what prostates were for. It never crossed my mind. And as I wrote in a piece, I had no symptoms. I didn't feel ill. And if it hadn't been for that blood test that my GP had done, I would never have known I had prostate cancer. And whether they've caught it early enough, I don't know yet. I'm still in that process because I had the operation and then unfortunately it came back quite soon afterwards. And then I did a course of radiotherapy and I'm on hormone therapy, which the journey, the words I've banned but still use myself. So yeah, it's something that men need to be aware of. The prostate cancer is on the rise. I think it's the second biggest killer of men in this country. So it's an important subject, and men need to be aware of their prostate, what it does, and how to test that it's doing okay for you. Yeah.
So I am very grateful that you shared it, because I think that cancer touches most of our lives. I know
1 in 2
both
people.
My grandparents died on my mum's side from cancer.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
And my half-brother lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago. It was the end of the pandemic. And I have a friend, as I mentioned to you, who was diagnosed only 4 days after I joined a foundation called PRETAC in Geneva.
Right.
Which is the Swiss branch of a new form of breast cancer testing that's developed by a gentleman called Dr. Frank Hoffman in Germany. His work is called, I'm going to forget that now. I'll have to double check. But it's all about using blind women who are taught how to manually test for much smaller tumors than what doctors can find. And so I was sitting there at that table listening to a doctor and the rest of the board, and because it was a board meeting and I'm joining them for communication. And I was thinking, gosh, she says 1 in 4 or 1 in 8. I don't know. She was talking about the numbers, and I was like, none of my friends have been diagnosed with breast cancer. And boom.
Yeah.
That was a Tuesday. On the Friday night, I was in tears behind my phone.
Wow.
That was a big
The statistics are really shocking. 1 in 2 people will either have cancer or be affected by cancer. So it's a big thing. And so I feel really happy talking about it. And I also started a podcast with a friend of mine who has secondary breast cancer. And unfortunately, she's only 38 and her cancer is treatable, but it's not curable. And fingers crossed, the treatment she's on at the moment, it's spread to her bones, it's everywhere. But the chemo she's on at the moment is holding it at bay and giving her longer than perhaps she was told she would have initially. So fingers crossed. But we do the podcast together to raise awareness and also to make people feel part of a community. And it can feel a bit lonely when you get diagnosed with cancer because there's so many questions you have. And to hear other people's stories and experiences, tips and insights it's a cancer community. And actually, do you know what? It's a really nice community. The people I meet and talk to are courageous and positive and inspiring. And so it sounds like a depressing podcast, but actually it's the sadness within it, but it's actually can fill you with joy sometimes. We just hear how extraordinary some people are in the way they deal with these things.
Of course. And actually, I was listening yesterday to the episode with Tessa. I can't remember her last name. The one who had the very rare form of eye cancer.
Yeah, eye cancer.
So she tells her story beautifully. Yeah, her eye cancer is crazy.
Wow, it's an extraordinary thing. I never knew about eye cancer. And to be told your eyes can have to be taken out 3 weeks after you've been diagnosed. And she just thought there was something wrong and went to the optician thinking it was her contact lenses. But as Tessa said, it seems so medieval to be told that your eye is going to be taken out. But I love the way, as you mentioned, that she runs a business and she approached it as a business. So she did spreadsheets of what the doctor said before each meeting with the specialist. She'd send them an email saying, okay, I want to be discussing these 6 points. I don't want to hear about those 4 points. So she really, it was boardroom cancer approach. And, and everyone has different ways of dealing with it. I loved her story and her approach and attitude. And also it was just fascinating hearing how she was given a false eye and how now she's going to have a 3D laser printed eye made for her. And
that was incredible.
So how technology it plays such an important part in treatments and ailments these days. And,
but she also tells her story in a way that's so compelling. She's so
compelling, isn't it? I know.
And she's very entertaining and she loves her way through this, even though it's this crazy operation.
Because it is crazy, and you have to acknowledge that it's just crazy because suddenly you're not in control of your body, and it's a really weird thing when you're not in control of your own body, and there's some comical things that happen and some horrific things that happen, and you have to embrace both of those.
Yeah, of course. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, and perhaps I've missed one of the episodes where you talked about that, but I wanted to ask you, what were your thoughts about how to tell friends and family about your own diagnosis, what you heard from others? Because I've noticed in my own life, I got estranged from a friend because her husband got prostate cancer, but I was not supposed to know, but people talked about it, but I was not supposed to know.
Right.
And then I wasn't sure when I was allowed to talk about it. And then she thought I didn't care. So we got all very muddled up.
Yeah, that's tough on all of you.
It's okay. But I also understand that some people just don't feel ready to talk about it. So
no, absolutely. There are some people who don't tell anyone at all that they've got cancer, that they're ill, and that's how they like to deal with it. I obviously wrote a big piece for the Saturday Times magazine, so my approach did a podcast. So that wasn't my approach. I thought, it's all content. But everyone has a different way of dealing, and everyone's way of dealing with it is the right way. But I find it easier to share and to share it with other people. But it's a hard thing to tell people because as soon as you tell someone you've got cancer, they think you're going to die. It's the truth. And it really is the bogeyman disease, isn't it? And the thing that sort of really gets me is I have cancer. Every time I watch a movie or a TV program, if someone's going to die or be ill, it's always cancer. And I'm sitting there watching TV thinking, oh, please can't they have a different disease? Don't let it be cancer. Because it always thinks, oh, God, here we go. And they always look really ill. And of course, some people do look really ill with cancer. But I look quite healthy inside. My body's not particularly healthy, but I look healthy, which is a bit of a mind-blowing confusion sometimes. Sometimes you want to look how you feel.
Yeah.
So everyone says, oh, you look really well. I think, oh, I really want to look ill. And everyone will feel sorry for me and they'll understand why.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm glad that I don't. But there's so many different approaches. And if someone told me, oh, I wouldn't tell anyone if I had cancer. And I suddenly thought, what should I be ashamed of having cancer? What anyone chooses about their own illness is their own choice and the right choice for them.
Thank you.
But for me, I found it easier to talk about it. But it is hard telling people. It's hard telling your friends and your family. And it's very hard for people to understand. And I think when I was first diagnosed, my husband was with me, but I did keep it to myself for a short while because I think that weirdly the storyteller in me, I'm afraid it even comes out in these circumstances. You think, okay, what's the story here? What am I going to tell people? How am I going to frame this? And so I had to work out what the story was. But first of all, I had to work out what I felt it was. And then I was able to share it. But I needed to know, like it was a newspaper story, I needed to know what the feature was. What's the beginning, the middle? I haven't a clue what the end is, but I needed to work out what the beginning and the middle were.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Well, we have a narrative brain. That's the one thing that we all have in common. But I also picked up on that in Tessa's story because she went as far as also through her husband telling friends and family how they were supposed to talk about it, what she wanted to hear about and what words not to say. And I thought that was an interesting approach because it is also the story that you're living, right? So
True.
I was quite inspired by how forward-thinking she was. Again, I don't think that I would have thought of that. But I guess the point of the podcast is to also open people to other people's experiences, thoughts, ideas, mistakes.
Some you can adopt, some you can ignore. And Tessa was quite bossy about it in a way, wasn't she? She said, this is how you're going to talk to me and this is what I'll talk about. And I understand that because when you get ill and you have cancer, all your friends and family very kindly ask you a ton of questions, but you suddenly get a bit exhausted of all the questions and everyone expects quite long answers from a good place, but you get really tired of answering questions about your cancer or your illness, and often you don't know the answers yourself. And it was someone who actually told me, they said copy and paste is going to be your best friend during this process. And they were absolutely right. You can just send the same reply to everyone. But it does get wearying not talking about the illness generally, but answering questions as what did the doctor say? What did the specialist say? And, everyone wants to know, are you going to get better and will you live? And often you don't know the answer. I still don't know the answer 2 years later. And so sometimes you feel a bit pressurized not knowing the answers that you're being asked.
I wanted to ask you about your friendship with Sarah because she's really wonderful. I love her.
She's extraordinary.
It's really funny because I've listened to you guys so much, like I feel like I'm in the room with you.
Oh, poor you. I'm so sorry about that.
No,
I apologize.
You sound like you're having a grand old time talking about these difficult things, especially when you guys started talking about the intimacy part and how to, because she's trying to date as well, which I think is really wonderful.
She is. She's got a boyfriend now and it's going incredibly well. Who knew? You've got incurable cancer and yet you can still find love and have a wonderful time. But she is amazing. She lives near me in the Lake District and she contacted me on Instagram, having heard through mutual friends I was ill, and asked if I wanted to meet up. And I thought, not really, because I don't know you in a nice way. I don't want to talk to a stranger. And then I bumped into her in the pub. It's quite small in the Lake District. You always bump into people. And just this bundle of energy and life and positivity. And so we just bonded very quickly. And what's quite nice sometimes, when you've got cancer, it's quite nice to talk to other people who've got cancer. Sometimes they understand some elements of it more than people who don't. And you can feel you can offload and be a bit more honest because you don't necessarily talk about the possibility of dying or that sort of stuff with your loved ones. Sometimes it's easier to talk about with someone you know less well. So we just talked a lot about cancer and shared all stories and insights and things we'd heard. And that's when we thought, we should. We thought we could do a podcast and share this and let other people share their stories. And also the thing for Sarah was she isn't married, she doesn't have children, and she's 38 and we don't know how long she's got. The thing that made her sad wasn't the fact that she didn't have children, she wasn't that bothered. The two things that made her sad was A, she was doing really well in her career and she was going to get to the top and now she won't. And so she was sad about that. And the other thing she talked about was her legacy. At 38, she didn't want to just disappear and die and that would be that. And so I thought if we do a podcast, that gives her a legacy. If I did another cover story for the Saturday Times magazine to come out. And that therefore she was on the cover of a magazine and that was another legacy and a wonderful thing for her mother to have, when Sarah eventually passes away. And so it was legacy and help that came up with the podcast ideas really. And that's when you can use your contacts and your storytelling to help others. I don't want to sound kind. I'm not really kind at all. This year is my year of kindness, and I'm going back to a complete evil person again in 2025. I'll be exhausted of kindness, so I don't want anyone to mistake me for a kind person. I'm just doing kind things for 1 year.
Okay. That sounds like a plan. You have a lot going on with all of that. Zoladex, is it called?
Oh, Zoladex, yeah. So Zoladex is... So one of the things that feeds prostate cancer is testosterone. Mm-hmm. So having had the surgery that wasn't entirely successful and the radiotherapy, then to be doubly sure, they put you on hormone therapy. So they put me on it for 2 years, and it cuts off your testosterone. But really, basically, it gives you the menopause. I have all the symptoms of the menopause. All women have this without cancer. Hands up. Wow. Unbelievable how much women put up with and complaining far less than men do. But also, there's a lot of side effects, not very nice side effects, because it's almost like chemical castration. And so your body changes, you have no sex drive at all, you have no energy. So there's lots of horrible things that happen with it. I loathe it. I hate it. And 2 years is a long time.
It's a long time to have that.
It's a long time. I've done it a year, and I went to see my oncologist last week, and I said, I'm coming off it. I'm not doing it anymore. I hate it. And even though that's a little bit risky, but also sometimes you just got to own your life and own your body. And when you're on Zoladex, it masks the signs of cancer. So also when you're on it, they don't know what's happening. The cancer could have gone, it could have grown, it could have spread. They have not a clue when I'm on Zoladex. So I want it to come out of my system, which it will in a few months' time. And then we can see what the cancer's done, whether it's gone, whether it's spread, and then we can come with a different treatment approach. I'm really excited, even though it's a little bit crazy to come off Zoladex.
Yeah. I felt very connected to you because a year ago I did my first IVF trial, and because I have uterine fibroids, they gave me the French equivalent of Zoladex, except that it lasts 3 months, a dose lasts 3 months. And it's an injection. And it was really funny because my gynecologist assistant she was really put off by the thing. She did not know this drug. She did not it was very thick. She had to mix things together. She was just really not happy to be injecting me. And I was trying to calm her down, which was not the really funny thing.
Should be the other way around. Yeah.
But like days before, I'd given my dog a chemical castration. So I was walking around just thinking, we are both with this.
Oh, Anne, that's terrible.
I know it's terrible, but it's also the reason why I know it's very similar to what you've got is that I read the fine print. It's the same drug that's being used in France for people with prostate cancer.
Ah, okay.
So it just blocks basically all hormone production. It was a terrible 3 months. I also got the night sweats, the kind of which it looks like someone has dunked you in water.
Oh, it's awful. I know.
And then when you dry off, you're shivering in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. It's so bizarre, isn't it? And the hot flushes and the mood swings.
I got anxiety as well, which was really fun, but coming out of nowhere. And thank God I practiced meditation, because otherwise I would have thought I was going mad.
I should be doing that. Yeah, that was a sensible approach. It's a shocker. Sarah had it for her breast cancer, and she came off it. She hated it too. But it's very important that we say that Zoladex saves a lot of lives, and a lot of people are able to tolerate it. Usually people who get prostate cancer are older than me, and the older you are, the less testosterone you have, and therefore the side effects are less strong. But because I'm young, and I use inverted commas in hospital terms, not in anyone else's terms. I always laugh when they say, "Oh, you're quite young." No, I'm not, I'm really old. But in their terms, and therefore there's more testosterone that you're fighting away from your body, and therefore your body hates it more than if you're older.
That's interesting. I did not realize that.
Yeah, but some people tolerate it, and it does keep some people living for many years with cancer. So don't want to put people off taking it, but for me, hate it.
It's also interesting to let people know about this part of the treatment, which I didn't understand or know about. Like most people, I just thought of chemotherapy as being like the thing. I think you did one, and you're going to do a second episode about the treatments. And I think that's really helpful, so people understand like a breadth of what are the most standard
there's so many different treatments. Exactly. And I haven't done chemotherapy, I've done radiotherapy, but there are so many different types of chemotherapy, which I didn't know until I got to know Sarah. And so dozens and dozens of different types of chemo, new ones being invented all the time, which hopefully will help people that the current ones don't. But yeah, there's, in a weird way, I looked upon and I'm not being facetious, I looked upon what I was going through as a story. And I know it's weird, but that was my coping mechanism. And I've never been to hospital before until all this began. And to have your abdomen cut open with 5 metal arms digging down through it to take your prostate out I thought, wow, I've never had surgery before. So it was painful and uncomfortable and very weird, but also quite interesting. And then when they said you have to do radiotherapy, I thought, I've never done radiotherapy. So I found it quite fascinating trying all these things, even though weirdly it was to make me live. It was still, I did take myself out to look upon it objectively and think, I turned it into, in my mind, I thought I'm going to turn this into a story stroke hobby. I thought cancer's going to be a hobby. I'm not going to let it be an illness. I'm not going to let it annoy me more than it should do. I'm not going to let it get in the way of too much, although it has a habit of trying to do that. I'm just going to look upon it as a hobby. Crazy, but that's how I manage it.
But it's interesting because you're not letting it define you. You're putting a distance.
It's an interesting point. I do think about that because I have let it define me over the last year as I writing about during the podcast. But I don't want it to rule me is what I try to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Now, one of the questions that came up as I was listening to you, which, and if I ever speak to Sarah, which perhaps I should follow up with her as well and meet her. What I wanted to ask you is, how's your relationship with your body?
Oh, I know. Particularly someone who's quite vain. You become less vain, I can tell you, because you're prodded, poked, cut open, zapped. Everyone's looking at all your bits the whole time. So you certainly become less self-conscious about your body. But one of the weird things about the treatments that I'm on is your body just does things that's nothing to do with you. So I put on 2 stone. I've just been on a good diet for 6 weeks and I've managed to get rid of most of it, which probably isn't particularly healthy, but anyway. And then your body hair falls out with the radiotherapy, and then it falls out with the hormone therapy, and then you put little pads of fat cone I think I'm going to get rid of. And they're all part of the treatment, so you have no control. And it's and you also talk about the sweats. So it's really weird how your body becomes this. Sometimes it feels like it's not your friend, because my body was my friend for a long time, and then suddenly it developed prostate cancer, and then it did this, and then it did that. So you sometimes feel like you're a puppet, and you're being pulled by all these strings, and you think, my God, it's now doing this, and I'm now doing that, and I'm doing that. And then you have to try and get clawback control, which so I went on this diet, and why are you dieting? You've got cancer. What the fuck? Sorry, swearing. What are you worrying about that for? But that's my way of regaining a bit of control, is trying to keep my body as it was as much as possible. But it's made me, what's interesting, Anne, is I've really struggled with the vanity side, or should you care about how you look when you're going through what I'm going through?
I think that's super important.
It is important. It's a good subject. And, I do a grooming column, and for a few months I did stop doing that column for the Times because I just couldn't bring myself to write about skin cream or Botox or whatever. And, when I was going, it just seemed tricky. And then I also found it hard that I thought it was a bit weird that I'm doing a podcast that comes out on Thursday about cancer, and then on Tuesday there'll be a piece in the Times about a massage that makes your bum bigger or whatever. So slightly exaggerating. But you know what? I have struggled with that. But what's been interesting with the podcast, and it's mostly women, I think, that we've spoken to, everyone cares about how they look. When people lose their hair, they'll all share all these amazing tips about the great wigs or hair systems or ways of keeping your hair, and how makeup made them feel, how clothes and the eyelashes. And all the women I spoke to really care. And I suddenly realized, you see what cancer doesn't mean you don't care what you look like anymore. And in fact, it's really important to try and look like yourself as much as you can, if that's what makes you feel better. And if you feel better on the outside, you might feel better on the inside too. I have struggled with that because I've been developing a skincare line with a doctor on Harney Street. We've been working on this for 3 years and it was meant to launch this year, but I put it on hold, because doing all the treatments, and also I don't know if I can again do a podcast about cancer on Thursday and then launch a skin cream on Tuesday. It's just, and everyone says that's my problem, no one else is going to look upon it in that way, but I put it back to next year. It's just, A, I don't need the stress of launching a brand this year.
Sure.
And B, I do struggle with the caring about how you look cancer thing. It's my problem, not a problem. It's my thing that I have to work out in my head.
I think, as you said before, it's just do what feels right for you, right? That's the most important.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel quite right yet, even though I know it should. I'll get there. I'll work through it.
Yeah, I think you can let go of the should.
I know. But, you earlier on, you were talking about cancer and work and how it affects you. And I think that one of the hardest things I found with having cancer is how it affects your work, because you don't have the energy and you don't know what treatment you're going to be doing. And in December, when this Zoladex comes out of my system, they might find that the cancer spread to my bones and I'll need to do chemotherapy or more radiotherapy or whatever. So it's very hard to plan because I miss working and I actually miss offices. I know lots of people don't miss offices. I loved offices and I'd love to do, and consultancy's fine, but I'd be more in control. You know what? And when you're a consultant, you're not really in control. You're suggesting things and helping with things, but you're not really making the decisions and implementing them fully. And I miss that. But I think it'd be unfair of me to go and start a job where in 6 months' time I have to leave it again. And so that's tough. You can't commit. You can't plan. And that's what I find very hard about this. Almost the hardest thing is you don't know what your future is.
Yeah, it's like a limbo.
It is limbo. And all the oncologists, they say, just imagine that all's going to be good, but that's easier said than done.
Mm. I also wanted to ask you about nutrition, because I know it came up a lot on many of the episodes I listened to as something that get wielded around. And I think you even said on the podcast and perhaps in the interview, in the pieces you wrote, that one of the first things that you did after you got the diagnosis is you started just to eat healthier and stuff. Is this something that you felt has had a real impact on how you feel? Or has it been your friend or your frenemy during the treatment?
Yeah, well, good thing. So, yeah, when I was first diagnosed, of course, I bought every single book about how to beat cancer. And there's lots of nutrition books. Lots of people said tomatoes will cure cancer or cabbage a day will make it go away, which is all lovely. But, of course, there's certain foods that feed cancer, and that's sugar does feed cancer for sure. So I went on the vegan diet, and I cut out the sugar, and I did everything that I was supposed to. Lost a lot of weight, made me quite thin, so I don't actually look ill. And then the cancer came back, so I thought, oh, sod that didn't work. I always ate quite healthy, to be fair. But then I began to eat lots of chocolate minstrels. And I think when your energy's zapped...
with the minstrels. Okay, now I get it.
Love a chocolate minstrel. But when your sort of weight fluctuates, energy dips, you crave sugar because you think it's a false, as we know, it's a false energy high it gives you. So then I did have cravings for chocolate, probably did eat too many chocolates. And then also I put on weight with the hormone therapy, and now I fast now, or don't have breakfast, basically. Fasting sounds better than saying I don't have breakfast. I much prefer that. Sounds really cool. And then I just have protein for lunch, and just protein and a few vegetables, but I don't have any sugar and no potatoes, no bread. So I've changed that. But that's, to be honest, more for weight than for... There's a lot that people tell you, and you have to sieve some of it out, and you have to edit it down. Also, some of the things that people tell you to do, and they all come from a good place, but you'll just have a really rubbish life. It would just be so boring. And I would prefer to have a shorter, fun life than a longer, boring life, if I'm honest. And I Googled, spent hours Googling wine and cancer. And then eventually I found a website that said, yeah, it's great. Oh, good. I'll believe that website. So I do still drink wine. It's hard, though. It's hard because it does have sugar in it. And of course, ideally one wouldn't. Yeah. But you've got to work out a balance where you're living, not just surviving.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to actually ask you about something else that's also about living, but it seems to me when I read your columns that somehow within them there's a love letter to your doctors and the NHS in general. Was I reading it right?
Is. Yes, I love the NHS. When I had my initial operation, I went private because the surgeon said, you've got bad cancer. It's a really aggressive high-grade one. So if you go on the NHS, it'll probably be done in about 8 weeks. If you go private, it'll be done in 3 weeks. And sort of what you've got, you need to do the 3-week ones. I thought out. But then after that, I went to the NHS. It would be too expensive to do radiotherapy and continue everything doing it privately. And my God, I know there's problems with the NHS and it's a slightly broken structure. But an amazing thing that's come out of all this is I've just seen so much kindness and cleverness and empathy and generosity from the nurses and the doctors and the oncologists. And when you do radiotherapy, you go every day for 7 weeks, you have radiotherapy, and they make it as easy as possible for you. And it's quite tricky when it's radiotherapy with the prostate. It's quite a lot of complications that you have to prepare for each day. But everyone was so smiley and so lovely, and I loved them. And when I was doing my radiotherapy, unfortunately, there was yet another complication, so I was in hospital for a week. And I was in a ward of 25 men, and there was holes in the sheets. But the nurses who don't much and don't get treated particularly well by some of the patients were angels, and they were so lovely. And I literally, you are right, I fell in love with them all, and I love the NHS, and I love the people who work for it. And I'm in awe of their capability, empathy, and generosity. Honestly, it's been a marvellous thing that's come out of this, is to see so much goodness.
It's one of the things that I felt coming through from each of the conversations with the guests that you had on the podcast. I feel like everybody also had that same level of awe and gratitude for the medical care that they received? I'm glad that I asked you about that, because I know that the medical personnel needs to hear all the praise that they can get.
No, they do. There's always a few bad experiences that people have. And there was a couple of things happened to me that weren't great, but on the whole, amazing. So very grateful, very lucky to be looked after so well.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you about was the semantics, the vocabulary around the disease that is the cancer. First, because a friend of mine was diagnosed when she was 27 years old. She survived. But I think the big difficulty for her, this was a while ago, so I don't think the support was built in as much as it is now. But first, she did not understand most of the terminology around it. And so strangely enough, my dad, who was a gynecologist, ended up being her consultant. So he could translate for her. So he would be able to just give her layman's term, just bring out the context for her in a way that she could receive it. But beyond that, there's a lot of words that can feel really wrong, or that can hurt you or irk you, trigger you. So, and you had a great conversation with Stephen Fry, but the two of you sort of pondered around the cancer journey, or the reason why not to call it that. Can you tell me a bit about your experience and what words work for you or
So it's really hard. It's really hard for friends, family, and strangers who meet people with cancer to get it right. And I got it wrong in the past, and it's quite stressful. So I also want the podcast to help those people. And you know what? I can even remember when I was 32 and my first friend got cancer and she died, and she was the godmother of one of my sons. But my wife handled it brilliantly, but I was nervous talking to her about it when I knew she only had a few months to live. And I remember I was walking the kids to her car and I said, God, how are you feeling, Ruth? And she suddenly snapped at me and said, in my head or in my body? And I went, both. But that wasn't the question she wanted on that day. And I didn't, and it's not always possible to get it right, but it always made me very wary of thinking about what people want to hear when they're going through these things. And as you say, some of the terminology is a bit rubbish. I mean, thank God people now don't call it terminal cancer. Well, they do, but it's been people are beginning to realize incurable is better than terminal. It's such a brutal word, isn't it? And a lot of people with cancer don't like battling cancer because someone always loses a battle, and then why did they were a loser. So that's not very popular. But even as you heard me discuss, Stephen Fry, even how you or I'm so sorry can go wrong. Yeah, and I said to someone as I talked about it, I said, I'm so sorry. And they said, why are you sorry? It wasn't your fault.
I know. I love that because I always say sorry. And I appreciated the way that he framed it. He was like,
it's
frame
sorrow. Because you have sorrow for their predicament.
Exactly.
But again, it's how someone wants to hear it. But it can make you uncomfortable worrying about getting it right. And that's how we talked about some of the term. And definitely terminal and battle were particularly got the thumbs down from Stephen Fry and from Sarah. Yeah. She doesn't even like saying chemotherapy because it just conjures up the horrible thoughts. So she calls it treatment. Because treatment sounds like it's making you better. Chemotherapy makes you ill to make you better. So you know what Sarah's advice is, because she's deeper into this than I am, is just ask the person with cancer how they want to talk about it. And they can tell you. And you can say, do you want to talk about your cancer today? And they can say yes or no. Or you can say, how should we approach this today? And just let them lead it. And that's the safest way to do it, I think.
Yeah. I know it's going to sound like a funky thing to ask now, but how about treatments? And what's the place of treatments when you're in the middle of treatment? Because to be fair, I really enjoyed reading about your treatments. Is there room for you to do things for yourself, or what do you do for yourself to make you feel better beyond the fasting?
I do use a lot of skin creams, always have done. And I have had Botox within the last year. And I did toy where I think, why do you care whether you've got some wrinkles and you have so many injections things getting into your body at the moment? Why elect to have another one? But in a way, you think in for a penny, in for a... But actually, what I've just done on Monday, I'm doing again on Monday, I've had lens replacement surgeries because I usually wear glasses, where they take the lens out of your eye and replace it with another one. So I did one eye this week and I'm doing the other eye on Monday, which is why I'm not wearing glasses now. And that's a vanity thing, but also a practical thing. For people who don't know, the Lake District, it just rains almost every day. It's the worst weather in the world. And if you wear glasses in the rain, they just get covered in raindrops, and you can't wear windscreen wipers on your glasses. And I do a lot of hiking and a bit of mountain climbing, and you can't really wear glasses when they're covered in rain. And so then you put your glasses in your pocket and you want to look at your phone and see which direction you're going. It doesn't work. So I'll block this. So I've done that. So that's a vanity stroke practical thing. I am less interested in those things because I've got other things going on.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Each to their own.
Yeah, of course. I also wanted to note that in your last piece for the Times, you talked about death literacy, which I thought was something that you picked up on Radio 4 that you thought was something that we could all talk about. Because, of course, the thing that's very tough when someone gets diagnosed is that immediate sort of connection to possible death. And I think we spend most of our time trying to ignore the fact we're all going to die. I don't know if you've seen the last year at TED in Vancouver, I think the talk of the week was by a death doula. She was very wonderful. And
I'll see that.
If you don't want to watch it, let me give you the cliff notes. She said, eat the cake, just for anyone listening. She said she hasn't said a single client who regretted eating cake. But also on that topic, you wrote, so after you got that bad blood infection after the radiotherapy, you wrote your own, not your obituary.
I did. I wrote my own eulogy.
There you go.
It was one of the nicest weekends I've had. I just planned my entire funeral and wrote my eulogy.
I'd love to ask you about that. I'm a bit of a control freak.
I am a bit of a control freak. And again, the story, I like to control the narrative. So I wanted the funeral to be fun and great. And so I planned it all. I didn't know whether I was going to pop off in a week or so or not. And then I wrote a eulogy, and it was a tongue-in-cheek eulogy, but to be read by a friend of mine. And I just love the thought of having to read this glowing, saint-like description of me that wasn't remotely true, but that I'd written he'd have to read because I died, and I bequeathed him to read it at my funeral. And it just really made me laugh when I wrote this eulogy about how I should have been Pope, which I still slightly believe. And it was quite fun planning I think I got a bit too excited about it. But I agree with you. Everyone dies. Everyone is dying after you're born. Very quickly, slowly begin to die. And we shouldn't pretend it doesn't happen. And I think it makes it scarier by not talking about it. And when I became ill, of course, I explored mortality in a lot more depth. And people don't like you talking about it, but I wanted to talk about it. And I don't still mind thought of dying because I've had a great life. Can't complain. I've had a great time. Been so lucky. So it'd be really churlish to complain about the fact I was going to die. And it seems churlish to quibble over dates. We're all going to die, so why quibble over when? And I really strongly believe that. But you have to be careful because some people get really distressed hearing about it. And I did talk to my sons about him. I got slightly overexcited. I took one of my sons to the church. I wanted my funeral. I was going, that's where I want the choir to be singing this. And that's where my friend Johnny's going to sing the song. And I was really excited, and he looked horrified. And I realized I had overshared with my son at that moment. So you do have to get the balance right. But people need to talk about death and not be afraid of it. It's not something you have to be, yay, I'm going to die soon. But it's going to happen, and be prepared for it and know about it. So I'm glad that there's this movement to people knowing more about dying and how you die. And I don't want to be in pain, but I'm not particularly scared of, I'm 58. I've had a good time. I can't not complain.
Thanks for sharing your views on that. It strikes me that for someone who also likes to create control in her life, I see how putting it together myself and just getting an outline ready, it would empower me in some way. Whereas the disease and the treatments can make you feel disempowered. That's
so true. This gives you that sense of control, exactly. And I just thought if I die, my husband might very well meaningly just not quite get it right of how I want that funeral to be. So I just feel so relaxed that it's on my phone in notes, and he knows it's there. He's not allowed to see it until I pop off. But if I die soon, he's got the details.
Oh, that's great. But the pendant to this death literacy was, and I don't know if I got this right, but back to the semantics and the vocabulary and the how to talk about it. I was thinking that maybe what you and Sarah are doing with your work is creating a cancer literacy opportunity for people who want to find out more about it. Because again, I find that sometimes it's so difficult to approach a topic. And if we never talk about it, if we never listen to it, if we don't listen to each other. And so I think that it is wonderful to have, for those who need it, to have this almost this window opening to hear. And
I think so. And you're right. That's what we wanted to do. It was just let people know what it's like and take away the taboo of it, really. It's just a thing that happens, and it's a thing that happens quite a lot. And the same way that we can talk about relationships or talk about snacks is talk about illness. It's a part of a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the work that both you and Sarah do. And I love your writing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else you write next, whatever the topic may be.
Oh, gosh.
Is there anything else that you want to add for our listeners before I move on to my closing questions?
No, I just think that if anyone has someone they know or love who's living with cancer, is the charities like Macmillan Cancer Support and Breast Cancer Now Support. There are so many amazing helplines, and they are really useful. And sometimes you just want to ring a stranger on the end of the phone and say, I'm feeling this. Has anyone else felt this? And there are forums, so there is always help out there. It doesn't have to be within your immediate circle if you're worried about burdening them. And yeah, there's some great support out there if you need it.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Now, so you may or may not have understood about me that in my spare time, I'm a mindfulness meditation teacher, which is a separate calling. And it's true that it's given me probably a different perspective on life because it's very different from the work I've done until now. And I also had not expected how it would transform my lens on life in general. Work and life. And so I like to ask my guests, when I talk about mindfulness, I talk about presence, about awareness, about how you feel grounded in your own skin, or perhaps other people would say aligned with yourself. And I wanted to ask you, what are things that have helped you feel good in your own skin, particularly in times of treatment or in general? What are your go-to things, whatever they may be?
Friends, love my friends. Friends are so important to me. And I have a great family, but I think particularly gay men, your friends become your found family. And the friendships I've had with so many people for so long, I really love my friends. And you have different friends for different occasions, don't you? The ones you moan to, the ones you make laugh. And my friends are really good at teasing me, and particularly about cancer. They make some really good inappropriate jokes, which I love. And that cheers me up. I don't like sad face. I like funny face. So I would say my friends, not even through this, but always, my friends are the most important thing to me. My sons, obviously, but beyond that is my fan family, my friendship group.
How wonderful. Now, what is your favorite word? And by that, not just because it sounds lovely, but a word that you could tattoo on yourself. And I know you have a big tattoo. I don't think there's a word on it.
3.
But a word you could live with.
One. Oh, hard question. Good question. The weird thing is, having done a podcast, and I don't know whether you find this is weird listening to yourself on the podcast, because everyone hates listening to their own voice, don't they? Mostly. But you also notice the words that you use that you didn't notice you use. And obviously, when you're recording a podcast, you always try and get rid of the But the word I've noticed that in the podcast I do that I use the most is a banal word. I always go, oh, wow. And it's because I hear so many amazing stories. And then I think, really, the best you can come up with is wow. Well, I've grown to love the wow. So I think it'll be wow, because wow, life's amazing. Wow, extraordinary things happen to us all. And wow, we hear some great stories. So weirdly, I think it would be wow. Also, I think it would look quite nice aesthetically if it was
Yeah, it's pretty. And it's also interesting, as you say that, I realize I say it quite a lot. It also is one of those few words, and right now I can't think of any others, that describes awe. Isn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I wish I would said also, I love the word discombobulated. I love the word effervescent, because it brings such joy and thought, doesn't it? But I think it would have to be banal. Wow.
Good one. What does connection mean to you?
That's back to the friends, I think, and that's the connection you have with your friends. And also storytelling is about connection, isn't it? And telling people a story and engaging them. And when you see someone read a story and their eyes go slightly bigger, or you can even see with a digital story, you can tell whether someone read the whole story or not. And I love that. And I used to find it hard with print magazines. You'd send a magazine out into the world. You didn't know what page they read or what story they read or how long they read it for, whether they smiled. Whereas the lovely thing about content online is you do know quite a lot of that journey. You can't see their face, but you can see how their behavior. And so that feedback you get from content online is a wonderful connection. That's a relatively new connection in this world, I think.
That's awesome. I never thought about that. What song best represents you?
Oh, God, that's so hard because you just want to choose a song that you love the most. And most of mine would be trashy 80s disco songs. Tiffany's, I think I'm alone now. But I think it would have to be a Pet Shop Boys song. They were the soundtrack of my youth and my life going forward. And I saw them play at the Royal Opera House a couple of weeks ago, and they were brilliant. Oh. It was very weird because Neil Tennant said, oh, this was our first single 41 years ago. I thought, oh, my God, I'm so old. I was around for a single 41 years ago in a band I still listen to. But I think of their songs, if I had to choose one that would be for me, probably for the first half of my life, it would be Pet Shop Boys, It's a Sin, because I had quite a good time. And maybe for the second half of my life, Being Boring, which is actually my favourite Pet Shop Boys song, which actually is about not being boring, but it's about how life evolves and things happen to you, and never thinking that you're going to run out of time. And I really love the lyrics to that song. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So I don't think I've told you, but I am curating a playlist with the answers of all my guests, and I will.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, good. That's a good idea.
What is the sweetest thing that's ever happened to you?
Oh, that's easy. And that would be the birth of my two sons. These sweet, round little baby boys came out of my wonderful ex-wife, and the sweetest thing that I've ever seen. And they remain that.
That's gorgeous.
I'm just lucky, you know, I was married to a woman and I have two sons, and I'm married to a man, and I'm quite greedy. I just try everything, don't I? But I've been so lucky.
Yes, I must mention I read your ex-wife's column religiously every week.
Yeah, good. No, she's great.
What is a secret superpower that you have? Now, I say secret, aka you've not told me about it yet.
Oh, okay. I think I'm quite good at getting stories out of people, which sort of makes a good journalist. But I think my secret superpower is I'm very good at forgetting secrets. So when my friends tell me a big secret, I'm so worried about spilling it. I've got a few friends who are actors in the film industry, so you know, their secrets have to remain secrets. And so I just make myself forget it. Awesome. And so their secret's always safe with me because I can't remember it. And then they'll tell me again, and I'll be all excited by the secret once more because I've completely forgotten it. So weirdly, it's quite a useful superpower.
That's a really good superpower. And you're helping them because they clearly want to share with you, but then you forget the information.
And they've shared, and then it's gone into ether. They're fine.
Brilliant. And what is a favorite book that you can share with us?
Oh, I have two favorite books. I'm not sure I could choose one. Yes. Truman Capote's In Cold Blood is just the most crisply written prose, the most brilliant piece of investigative journalism, and brings a story alive with not with a slight aloofness, but also takes you into the room and the minds of those two guys who murdered the Clutter family that the book writes about. It's a brilliant piece of writing, and I love Truman Capote, even though he was a little bit naughty towards the end of his life. Probably the other book was Bruce Chatwin's What Am I Doing Here? And he was an amazing travel writer who sadly died of HIV complications in his late 40s. But he was a brilliant travel writer. And I haven't done that much travel, so I can live vicariously through his books. But again, his objective, crisp, evocative prose, like Capote's, they're my two favourite writers. Brilliant books. Chatwin's you can dip into because it's all different essays, and some are funny and some are extraordinary, and I totally recommend them both.
Oh, I totally want to read that now. Okay, thank you.
Good.
Where is somewhere that you visited that you felt really had an impact on who you are today? Boringly,
that is going to be the cancer centre at Guy's Hospital. And I'll tell you, A, they treat me, B, the people, as I said already, are lovely. But the weird thing is I often have to go there and I walk into, and they've designed it, and it's all colourful and it's light and it's airy, it's spacious. It's so brilliantly and thoughtfully designed. But it's really weird, and no one understands this, but it's my happy place. I walk in there and I'm happy. Isn't that weird? But I just think it's so full of kind, helpful people, and I literally am excited when I go in there, which is sane, and everyone thinks I'm mad, but it's my happy place. And I think that's changed me a lot physically and mentally.
That's amazing.
A bit of a weird answer, but it's true.
Imagining that you can step into a future version of yourself.
God, poor me.
What most important advice do you think that this future you needs to give to current or present state you?
In a way, I think the advice I give, I wouldn't really need to give because I'd already have followed it, which sounds a bit, and that would be just do it, which is the Nike slogan, I think, isn't it? Isn't it Nike, just do it? Yeah, just do it. And having jumped into all sorts of hot pots of madness and fun and craziness, I've never regretted a single thing I've done, even though some have led to some awful situations. But I married different people, are amazing. I've had children, I've been gay, I've been straight. I just do it, experience things, try everything, never say no, because you never know how long you've got or what's around the corner. Just love and experience every element of life and make mistakes. So just do it.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a shame it's a Nike slogan, but they're right.
It's a good one.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's done well for Nike.
Yeah. And now this brings us to my last and my favorite question, which is what brings you happiness?
Oh, okay. So I moved to the Lake District, beginning of lockdown, as I said, and I took up mountain climbing, and it's these amazing, the highest mountain in England, Scafell Pikes in the Lake District. There's another wonderful mountain called Helvellyn. And I started mountain climbing, and particularly during lockdown, it was so quiet and the weather was amazing that first lockdown. I think climbing to the top of a mountain and looking down, everything's small and the specks below you. And I think that's the most wonderful, because this sounds like everything, but it makes you realize how unimportant you are. You're just a small little pebble in a mountain. And weirdly, that releases you. You think, I'm just something that's going to be a little part of a mountain and a piece of nature and landscape. And it's quite humbling, and it's also beautiful. And you just realize that whatever happens, whatever crazy things, however badly people behave, however terrible things that happen in the world, nature always wins over, and it continues, and it beats us all, and it's magnificent, and it's strong, and it's unwavering, and it puts you in your place, which is actually weirdly a really nice thing to happen.
Thank you. It's funny, you're reminding me, I read not long ago, but I can't remember where, that one of the things that can make us feel most connected is when we realize we're part of like a tiny piece in the much wider whole. It's interesting.
Instead of diminishing you, it somehow enlarges you just realize we're all little bits of a wonderful thing, and whatever we do, we're just there, and then we go, and it's fine. Everything continues without us. Takes the pressure off.
Takes the pressure off.
You don't have to achieve amazing things.
Oh, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here for this conversation through our really hilarious tech troubles, including my computer that decided to reboot at the last minute.
Change location. Ran down the street with these giant headphones on, looking insane. But I'm glad it worked out.
I really appreciated everything that you shared, and I really enjoyed the work that you and Sarah do, and I'm looking forward to continuing to listen, not just for my friend, just because it's a wonderful podcast to listen to, and we know that this disease is a part of many of our lives, so I encourage everybody to discover it.
Thank you for having me on your rather wonderful podcast. I was very flattered to be asked to be on it. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure, and I hope that I'll get to see you sometime soon.
Let me know. I will be here. I'll make sure I'm here.
Okay.
All right, Anne. Thank you very much.
I'll speak to you soon.
I will do. And you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
So, friends and listeners, thanks again for joining me today. If you'd like to hear more, you can subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Anvi on Threads, on Instagram, and V Mulatala on LinkedIn. If you don't know how to spell it, the link is in the notes. Or on Instagram at _out of the clouds, where I also share daily musings about mindfulness. You can find all of the episodes of the podcast and much more on the website outoftheclouds.com. If you'd like to find out more from me, I invite you also to subscribe to the Meta View, my weekly newsletter where I explore coaching, brand development, conscious communication, and the future of work. That's the Meta View with 2 T's, themetaview.com. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to Out of the Clouds. I hope that you will join me again next time. Until then, be well, be safe, and take care.